Hi guys, in this lesson we're going to create an S3 gateway endpoint, and we're also going to look at the differences between gateway and interface endpoints for S3. So we've got interface and gateway endpoints. You can actually use both with S3. So we're usually talking about using a gateway endpoint. That's the one that's most commonly used, but you can also use an interface endpoint as well. Now let's first explore gateway endpoints. So let's say we have an EC2 instance in a private subnet, and we want that instance to connect to a bucket. Well, in that case, of course, we can create an S3 gateway endpoint. And for the gateway endpoint, we need the route entry in our route table. Okay, so that's really important to remember. With the gateway endpoint, you have the route table entry. And then we can connect to the S3 bucket from the instance. Now, in a previous lesson, we actually used Session Manager to connect to our instances in a private subnet. Now, a Session Manager requires an interface endpoint to connect to your EC2 instances unless you have certain ports open. So if you have port 443 outbound to these particular domains, these three domains here for AWS, then you're able to utilize the agent to talk to Session Manager. If you don't have a NAT gateway, then the only way to connect to that instance via Session Manager is by configuring an interface endpoint. Now, of course, you can use an instance in a public subnet as well to connect to a gateway endpoint. And that's what we're going to do in the hands-on. We're going to launch an instance in a public subnet so we don't have to go around actually configuring the interface endpoint for Session Manager, which is a fairly involved process actually. And that means that we can actually test whether we're utilizing the endpoint. And what we're going to do there is we're going to set a policy to deny access unless we're using the gateway endpoint so that we can prove that the instance is not going via the internet gateway itself. Now, as I mentioned, there are options for S3. So we've got gateway endpoints and interface endpoints. So what are the key differences? If you use gateway endpoints, you're using the S3 public IP addresses. Okay, so your connections remain private, but you're actually connecting to the public IP address, so the same endpoints essentially as you would if you were connecting via the internet. You use the same S3 DNS names because they resolve to those public IPs. Gateway endpoints do not allow access from on-premises. It does not allow access from another AWS region as well, but you're not billed. So there's a definite cost advantage there. With interface endpoints, remember with an interface endpoint, an interface, an elastic network interface is created in your VPC. In that case, you're using private IP addresses from your VPC to access S3. Now you are using the private IP addresses in both cases. However, you're connecting to the public IPs of S3 if you're using a gateway endpoint. The interface endpoint requires endpoint-specific S3 DNS names. So you've got to update applications to configure them to use those specific DNS names. It does allow access from on-premises, and it allows access from a VPC in another region using a peering connection or transit gateway. However, you are billed for the interface endpoints. Now, what we're going to do now is go over to the console, and we're going to create a gateway endpoint for Amazon S3. I'm in the EC2 management console, and I'm going to launch an instance in a public subnet. So just use the Linux 2 AMI T2 micro. I don't need a key pair. And all I'm going to do here is just edit and make sure that I go into a public subnet. So I'll just choose US East 1A. This is public. And then for security groups, I'm just going to select a security group that I've used before. So maybe this one from the NAT Gateway Lab. Okay, so what else do I need? Well, I do need S3 access. So what I'm going to do is just stop back up here to the instance profile, and I'll use this SSM instance profile. We created that in a previous lesson. That one has S3 full access. So let's just launch this instance. Now, while that's happening, we can then go to the VPC management console, and we're going to create our gateway endpoint. So for that, we simply go to Endpoints, click on Create Endpoint, just scroll down to here, and I'm going to search for S3. And now we see a few options. The middle two here, gateway and interface, these are the ones we want for S3. And in this case, we're going to use a gateway endpoint. So next, you need to select your VPC. I'm using my default VPC. And then you need to configure your route table. Now I'm going to choose the route table that's associated with the public subnets. That's this one here. It's the main route table. For policy, I'm going to leave it at full access for now. We're going to modify that shortly. And let's just create the endpoint. And you can see it becomes available really straight away. Let's go to route tables. I want to check the route table for my default VPC. It's this one here. And straight away you can see that we have a destination via this target. Okay, so this is the route table entry. The PL is the prefix list. If I click on that prefix list, we can see it here and we can see the entries. So these are the IP ranges for S3. You can see they're public IP addresses. So we are connecting to public endpoints, but we can do so even from a private VPC using private IP addresses. Okay, let's check our instance. The instance is here. Now I want to make sure that I've got rules. I don't have a rule for SSH. So under security groups, let's come in here, click on edit inbound rules. I'm going to add SSH, or you can, of course, use Session Manager if you'd like to. So I'll just save that rule. Let's come back to the instance and then let's connect using EC2 Instance Connect. Okay, so here we are. So let's try and run AWS S3LS and I can see the buckets in my account. Now, how do I know that I'm not using the internet gateway rather than the prefix list and going via the gateway endpoint? Well, one way we can prove that is by, let's come back to our endpoint. Let's go to policy. We have this policy that allows everything. Let's edit the policy. And then let's just change the allow statement to deny and save. And now come back to Instance Connect and let's try and run the same command. Now we get access denied. So that's definitely what's happening. We are being denied because the policy that's associated with the gateway endpoint is denying us that access. So if I go back in, just allow it again, click on save, come back, and it should be working again. And there we go. So that's it. That's how to create and configure a S3 gateway endpoint and then prove that we're actually using that gateway endpoint. All right, so I'm actually finished with this lab. So all I need to do is come back and terminate my instance to clean up. And the other thing is, of course, to go back to your gateway endpoint, delete your endpoint, and that should go away pretty quickly. And then usually I'll just go then and check my route table to see if there's a route left over, and it's taken it away for me. So that's nice and clean.